You are live on YouTube.
Thank you. Welcome to August 23rd Economic Growth and Development Committee meeting. I have a quorum. Has everybody had a chance to look at the July 20th minutes? Yes, no?
Yes.
At least you're honest.
Oh,
Do I have a motion to?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Supervisor Fraser. Is there a second?
Maybe the thing to do would be.
Is there a second to approve the minutes from the July 20th meeting? Thank you, Supervisor.
Trust the code.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Carried. We'll start with planning. Go ahead, Wayne.
Good morning. I have two items for the committee consideration this morning. The first on the agenda is Resolution 148, or I'm sorry, resolution request to amend 148. This was an agreement with Schroon Lake, Horicon, and Chester for invasive management control. It was a grant award from the local waterfront revitalization program, Department of State. That agreement defined certain terms and responsibilities, one of which was the communities to reimburse the county for expenses for a contract for Dive Solutions company. That repayment schedule was actually never included in the original agreement and is based on a historical precedent from Soil and Water Conservation as to the distribution of funds and the responsibility. We actually did receive payment last year from the communities based on this formula. And the treasurer's office and our department really had some scratching of our head here to figure out how to appropriate it and put it into revenue appropriately. So we want to take care of the oversight in the agreement and put in the repayment schedule. And months ago, I did talk with Robert about it, and this was how we figured to go forward, was to amend, put a payment schedule as an attachment to the original memorandum.
Do I have a motion to bring this to the floor?
I'll make
Supervisor
that
Garrity,
motion.
Seconded by Supervisor Fraser. Any discussion? Supervisor Leggett.
Yeah, so when we've been paying the county $4,200 and some odd dollars a year for 3 years now. We didn't have to?
It said in the agreement that you had to, but it never gave the split. So this is kind of memorializing the split that actually Soil and Water initiated in 2013 for similar programs. So we just carried that same formula forward. You get off cheap.
We do, but we're happy to contribute what we can.
Any other discussion, questions? I'll call the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Carried.
Okay, the second item for committee consideration is a resolution request to designate a environmental, their actual term, a certifying officer and environmental responsibility certification. Resolution 28 authorized the county to submit an application for Countryside Adult Home for upgrades and repairs to that facility through the Community Development Block Grant Program. Resolution 264 amended 28 to allow the chairman to sign any agreements. However, in a new format this year, the state is requiring a separate resolution to designate a certifying officer for the environmental review record. And the request is to have the designation extended to myself. Since I'm the one completing it, it's one we've historically done it for 40 years that way, but now they want it in the form of a resolution.
Supervisor Stroud, are you bringing that to the floor? All right, Supervisor Garrity with the first. and
I'll make the
second.
motion.
Supervisor Stroud, thank you. Any questions? Supervisor Bramer.
May I? Thank you, Chairwoman. Have you identified any environmental impacts related to the countryside renovations?
The short answer is no, and it is a separate process from, say, seeker. This is for the NEPA, National Environmental Protection Act, and all it relates to is actually the activity is, I believe, an excluded item under the NEPA because it's rehabilitation of an existing building, no increase in footprint. So in relation to the federal statute that we have to comply with, it's an exempt activity, actually. So
May I follow up? Nothing about, there's no like asbestos remediation or increases to the sewer system, that kind of thing.
that will be part of the seeker process that will come during the actual construction phase. We did have, as part of the assessment that was done by Beardsley a few years ago, Atlantic Testing did undertake some testing, and there were some issues with the floor tiles. Whether those are going to remain in place, be covered, removed, will be part of the whole construction contract and specs. So there may be some issues there that need to be dealt with from an environmental standpoint, but right now they have not been identified.
Thank you.
All done?
Mhm.
Any more questions? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Carried.
Okay, also on the agenda, and I know we're running late, Sarah's sitting over in the office and she has a brief presentation of activities that have been going on. So if we can have her share her screen. So I will send it over to Sarah. The link for this presentation has been added to the agenda. It wasn't in the initial one that was sent out, but the one that I handed out today and we forwarded to Amanda's office does have the link to this presentation. And embedded in this presentation are a number of links to the programs that she's going to talk about. So you all can look at it later at your leisure and explore some of the embedded links that are in here.
Okay, can everybody see the presentation?
Yep.
Okay. So just as a reminder, Wayne and Ethan and Pat in particular had a very busy June and July preparing 6 applications for the CFA process. The total dollar amount of those applications was $787,000. We should hear back about those grant awards in December timeframe. Wayne, did you want to add?
Also, not as part of the CFA was a follow-on CARES Act final application for Countryside for $810,932. That application was requested by the state agency after reviewing an initial application. And while they will not make a final determination on that until the September board meeting of the Housing Trust Fund, I have been instructed by the Community Development Block Grant staff to include that CARES Act funding in all of the environmental reviews and documentation release of funds requests that are being submitted. So that's a roundabout way of saying that once we were invited to submit a full application, that it's pretty much, I would say 99.9% sure that we're going to get it, since they want us to include everything in the release documentation. So, but that all went on the same time as we were doing the CFA application. So it was a hectic month or two, as Sarah indicated. Sarah?
Okay. And we have provided more details about all of these projects in the agenda packet for last month. So feel free to take a look back at that if you need a refresher on any of these. Ethan has also been evaluating a new grant opportunity. Ethan, did you want to talk about this for a minute?
Sure. Yeah, this was just announced by the EDA about the end of the CFA cycle. And I actually started reviewing this with our tourism department, and we are looking at potentially providing assistance to the tourism department to put an application together. So I'm going to be working with the tourism department to sort of shepherd them through this process wherever possible. But we're still in the early stages of understanding, what the lift is to actually apply for this, administer it, and how competitive our application would be. So we're collaborating on this one.
Okay. We've also been collaborating with the Regional Planning Board on quite a number of projects recently. I think we've benefited from Chris's presence there, as well as Ethan's wife, Allison. So we have a number of joint projects. I just finished helping Beth with the data prep for the NTIA broadband application, which was submitted last week. We continue working on the quantifying phosphorus reductions project, which we talked about a little bit last month's committee meeting. I'm also going to be developing some economic dashboards as part of the Regional Planning Board's Business Retention and Expansion Program. So we've begun preliminary discussions on that. And Ethan is going to be assisting with updating the comprehensive economic development strategy document, which is updated every 5 years. There's a link to the previous one from 2016 here in the slide, and the updated one for 2021 will be completed by the end of the year. So I think we have a good working relationship with the Regional Planning Board, which is fantastic, and we look forward to continuing to collaborate with them next year as well.
Yeah, I would actually, if I could just jump in, I'd like to probably do some additional outreach with some of the supervisors regarding the SEDS update. This is a really critical document, and there is so much money being released on the federal level right now. I think it would be really critical that we take a hard look at the SEDS and how Warren County fits into this regional strategy, because it does put us in line for a lot of money potentially. That's it.
Thanks, Ethan. One project that is just coming to a conclusion for the season this year, we implemented real-time data collection for milfoil harvesting. It's something that we've been wanting to do for a while, and we finally got it underway this year. And by all accounts, it's been very successful. So basically what this allows us to do is view the actual real-time volume of milfoil being collected, the density in each of the locations where the crews are working. And we're able to have much, much better data than we've previously had. So we're going to have a sort of a follow-up meeting once the season concludes in the next week or two, meet with the divers and the supervisors, get some feedback from them about what worked well, what we possibly can improve for next season, and see if we can actually add to the data that they're collecting while they're out in the field. We also, thanks to Amanda, created a historic milfoil dashboard to try to quantify some of the data that's been collected over the past 30 years or so in Lake George. So I've provided a link to both of those dashboards here in the slide. So feel free to take a look at those. We've applied for funding to expand this model to Schroon Lake and use a similar type of real-time data collection for Schroon Lake. So hopefully we'll get funded. The letterboxing has been a huge success. I think it exceeded our expectations on all fronts. We've distributed 4,000 passports and have run out of those, had to get a third printing, which thankfully tourism helped with funding. We've had numerous visitors coming out of state just to Letterbox. So these have been multi-day trips to the area to complete the letterboxing. We've increased traffic to a wide array of destinations in the first wilderness town. So we have very happy proprietors and museum staff. So we're just chugging along on that. We'll pull the boxes out in the fall for the winter, and then we'll put them back out again next spring.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Supervisor.
Yeah, if I can comment on that, this has been wildly successful, and the Historical Society of the Town of Chester has to have the museum open 3 days a week now through the summer to be able to accommodate all the folks that are demanding to come in and get stamped. So it's really driven a lot of traffic. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor. So I'll let Ethan speak to this. We have various septic projects going on. So Ethan.
Yeah, so we're sort of up to our neck in this septic stuff. So, we're in the process right now evaluating approximately 66 applications that we received for the Environmental Facilities Corporation DEC septic replacement program. We're expecting to get some letters out towards the end of this month or early September, notifying applicants whether or not they were successful or not. Also had an opportunity to talk to another regional clean water coordinator about advocating for additional funding through this program. I think that if we can prove that we have, high levels of need and we can efficiently and diligently spend this money down for future rounds, hopefully we can make a good case that, we can get more money. Then also, we work with the Lake George Park Commission on their septic committee, and that's been pretty useful. I think I forwarded some of the information to the various supervisors that are working on the county level with this septic initiative. But basically, the Lake George Park Commission has started gathering the most up-to-date scientific information, peer-reviewed and published journal articles about the impacts of septic systems on surface water. And then they've also done a good summary of existing regulations from around the Northeast that can prove, useful for the county as they start looking at possible solutions. So it's been useful to be able to sort of weave those two things together. And I would encourage any supervisor that is working at the county level on septic initiatives to at least review some of the materials that are posted on the Lake George Park Commission website. I think we might have a link for that here.
So we are wrapping up our 2016 Local Waterfront Revitalization Program First Wilderness Grant Award. There were several, we had some additional time that we could spend in the history section of the award that we received. So Amanda has done a phenomenal job on projects that we're getting ready to release. One is a walking tour of the Mill Pond area and Brant Lake. It's interactive. It will feature it on our history mapper. So definitely take a look at that. And then another project she's been working on with our county historian is retiring the county's bicentennial website and updating it with a new improved county history website. So I put a link to the draft of that. It's near completion and we'll be officially releasing it soon, hopefully in the next week or so. We're also working on redesigning panels for the kiosks in the First Wilderness and creating large size maps that will go in those kiosks. So that should be wrapping up soon as well. And you should be seeing those appear in the kiosks in the next few months. The FCC recently released cellular coverage data, which is not a data set that we have had before and is a great addition in our quest to provide both cell and broadband service throughout the North Country. I downloaded that data, did some processing, and created an interactive map showing dead zones. So in other words, areas of the county as well as the state that do not have any cell service. So feel free to play around with that. The link is right here in the text. And I think this will also be the topic of a NISAC session at the meeting on Wednesday, at the NISAC meeting.
correct. If I can add, that will be 8 o'clock session, Wednesday morning of NISAC. They will be discussing this. Sarah was kind to update and interpret some of the data for them that they'll be using that presentation. So thank you, Sarah. But if you're at NISAC, that's the session you might want to consider.
And finally, as you're aware, we received the 2020 census redistricting file. So I'm in the process of processing that data. This is just a very small release. There'll be a lot more data coming over the course of the next year. This particular release includes information about overall population, number of housing units, detailed race information, population over and under age 18. So I'll be generating a couple more maps similar to this one. And I'll probably put an interactive version up as well that just cover these few topics. And I'll send everybody a link when I have that ready to go. And that's it. Any questions from anybody about anything?
Supervisor Bramer?
Thanks so much. Going back to the CFA grants, I know that you put in for an award on the housing needs study. I think that's really important, and I would like to see us go forward with that, even if we don't get the grant funding. Is there a plan to do that, and do we have any money available to do that? If we are not awarded this in December, I'd like to see us move forward. I think it's something we, especially given that discussion we had on Friday about the lack of affordable housing for people who live in our most tourist communities.
Right, right. I believe this committee did, if not actually resolve, agree that we would try to commit some funding regardless of whether we got the grant or not. We just haven't sat down and figured out a timeline. Go ahead, Wayne.
The intent is if it does not get funded, EDC and the LDC have committed financial resources towards that. We put in a grant application for $40,000. If that does not get funded, my intent is to come and ask this board for the $40,000 to do the study. We'd like to use the grant to do it, but we'd also ask the board's consideration to fund that in the event that we're not successful in the CFA.
Supervisor Bramer?
Thanks. When we have the money, what is the first step here? Where are we in the process?
I would have to defer to Pat to that and to Jim, because I've not been involved in those day-to-day discussions, but we would look at both market potential and unmet needs, and you know whether or not. And my personal point on this is we need to look at a delivery mechanism, whether it be through the county, whether it be in support of a not-for-profit, which is where the state really likes to funnel their housing money, is through not-for-profits. So do we look at an NPC, RPC, and provide some financial support to that agency for administrative funds? Because when you look at the home program, the restore program, which are housing assistance programs, or even the community development block grant program for new construction, there is very limited, if any, administrative dollars. And that's the impediment to making something really work. And at my budget meeting, I did talk about transitioning the department from being revenue dependent to being more open to either planning activities or activities that had limited, if or none, or no administrative dollars. But that would take a commitment by the board to kind of replace those administrative dollars that are no longer available through the grant programs.
Are there any other questions? Sarah?
Lots more, but I'll hold them. Thanks, Chairwoman.
Okay. Sarah, Ethan, thank you both very, very much. It seems as though there's really nothing you don't do, and you always continue to impress us. Thank you. Wayne, did you have anything else?
That is all I have for the committee today.
All right. Does the committee have any other questions? Is there any public comment on?
Hi, there is no public comment.
Supervisor Bramer.
I just want to say thank you to Ethan and Sarah for all their work, especially Ethan. I know he's been working behind the scenes hard on those septic applications, and I'm seeing that just tangentially as they come through. So it's really exciting that we have so many people interested in wanting to protect Lake George water quality, and they're working on that through the department. So thank you to both of them, and Sarah working on all that census data as well, and everything else they're doing. It's good. Good stuff.
Amen.
All right, we'll move on to EDC then.
Thank you all.
In the shift.
I'm cool.
Thank you. Ben,
Hey, Jim, how are you?
Good morning, everyone. I think we're looking to fire up these charts. I want to go through quickly a number of things, some of which you are already touching on, and some of which are updates from things that we've talked about previously. While we're getting the charts up, but I want to give you an update on where we stand on the broadband grant, what happens next in the arena of broadband. We've talked a lot about housing already in the previous presentation that you just received, but there's a work group that we've put together, and I want to share with you how that is involved in some of the things that you've already talked about and maybe some additional things as well. I'll give you a quick business activity update, and then I wanted to mention the fact that we are in the planning of a memorial fund and activity for Ed Bartholomew, and I want to share some of that with you as well. You can put them up if you have them. Let's go ahead and, can you click through to the first map for me? I think it's chart 3. There we go. So the last time I came to present to you, I shared with you our intention to apply with 6 other counties for the NTIA broadband grant. That has been successfully submitted. Based on the ECC data, there were roughly 600 addresses that did not meet the criteria for having broadband service in Warren County, and they broke down in largely 5 areas, these 5 areas that I've put on the map before you. They include a significant area near Lake Luzerne, an area in the extended area of Johnsburg, an area south of Chester near Friends Lake, an area in the kind of the in-between area between Horicon and Bolton, and an area that extended from some existing work that's already being done in Thurman. The NTIA grant has been successfully submitted, nearly 3,000 addresses across the 6 counties, including our addresses, which totaled somewhere in the neighborhood of 400. So we were able to get the majority of the addresses that are associated with these 5 areas to be bid on by the carriers. And that was the difficulty in the process. It was not simply identifying where we needed service. It was to find a carrier who would be willing to extend their service into that area consistent with the provisions of the grant. It was an open-ended question about how successful we would be at that. The fact that we were able to get roughly 75% of the Warren County addresses that required this level of broadband connection covered by a carrier is remarkable. They were not the only areas, by the way. There are additional areas of small numbers in addition to these areas that you see before you. But if this,
I'm sorry to interrupt. I was told somebody needs a nurse. No? Somebody needs a. Sorry.
that's okay. I was just worried that maybe things were going to go much worse for me. When you bring the medical support in, it's always a bad sign. Let's imagine that this grant is successfully awarded, and I think that's an open-ended question about whether we will or we won't. largely for areas that are not in our control. New York is not very competitive in terms of its cost structure to deliver broadband. The fee structures and taxes around broadband are excessive. However, we've been very successful in terms of the pricing strategy here. I do believe we made a compelling case that is competitive on a national basis based on not only the municipal matches that you and the other counties provided, but also the matches that came from the various carriers. But let's imagine for a second that we were able to get this grant. At the completion of this work, which would be done over the next 12 months, we would be over 95% covered in Warren County in terms of the addresses with a broadband connection above 25 megs. In addition, we would be over 80% at a broadband connection over 50 megs. That puts us in one of the leading counties in New York. It's a remarkable amount of work that has occurred not only around this grant, but in the last year. And I think sometimes the public is having a hard time keeping up. So we're in the process of trying to not only share this information with you, but share it as widely as we can. Warren County is actually, particularly for what is considered to be a North Country county, very well covered. And this is important because in order for us to participate in the next wave of economic activity, it is essential that businesses and homes have a viable broadband connection. We've talked a lot about this. The good news is we're in a very strong position. In addition to this, the regional work that went into developing this grant bodes very well, not only for us, but for the entire area. It's hard to get 6 counties to do anything. I'm sure you know that better than anybody. But we did manage to get 6 counties to collaborate on this. And most of our neighbors have far greater need than we do. So what is this quid pro quo? You know, how does this trade work? If we're in a better position than most of our neighbors, what is it that we provide and what is it that we get? Well, I can tell you in order for us to finish the work that remains, it gets harder and more expensive to get the very last people. And meanwhile, while we have the vast majority of our public meeting the broadband standard of the grants, it's going to make it very difficult for us to successfully advocate for those funds. We'd have to do it pretty much on our own. However, if we continue to collaborate with our neighbors, we bring the leadership and resources that we have to bear. And I'll give you an example. Sarah's work to quickly put together a macro map for those 6 counties literally saved thousands of dollars and weeks worth of work. Our ability to be able to come in with those kind of resources on behalf of the area means we get to borrow their large areas of unserved or underserved territory and continue to work on the last bits that we need to do. It's a good and fair bargain. And we're quite happy to lead it from EDC. Important to understand we're facilitators in this. The funds don't come to us. We don't have any direct authority in any of this, but we do provide the weekly leadership to garner the meetings, the work to put the various resources together, the ability to troubleshoot amongst the providers, and the relationships that we've been able to establish over time. I think you're going to quickly see ECC used as the standard for how this work is going to be pursued, not only in the area, but probably across the state. That came because of you and your leadership. We authorized that ECC study a year ago. It's now become the de facto standard for how this work is going to be done across the state. You are leaders, whether you recognize it or not, in securing broadband, not only for your population, but developing solutions that will work for our entire area. And I want to commend you for it. And I think you should share it with your constituents. And to that extent, we will be happy to help you. We will come out to any meeting that you have with your public, whether it's a town meeting, whether it's a specific session dedicated to this, whether it's a workshop. We'd certainly love to help you address any open-ended questions from any of your constituents about this. And there's more work to be done, but we are in a decidedly different place than we were a year ago. And you should be proud. No matter whether we get this grant or not, I think the work that's gone on here has positioned Warren County as a leader. So, on to things that are maybe not quite as bright. We commissioned a housing work group earlier in this year using much the same model that we approached broadband with. Again, we have no statutory authority here. It's not our intent to try to develop one. However, there's a problem. We talked about it. We just talked about it for a number of minutes in the previous presentation. Let me give you a sense of why this is a problem. earlier this year, and I think you heard from Liza earlier today, there was a point in May where we had 2,600 open jobs in Warren County. At that same time, I'm going to show you in a second how many homes we had. Now, right now, the data that I have is around single-family homes. We're working to quickly collect it in terms of total number of dwellings that are available for people. But would you mind clicking to the next chart? This is in the month of July, this is the total number of single-family homes that were available in Warren County, just under 150. However, look at that last bar way over to the right. Those are homes over $500,000. The vast majority of homes that were for sale in Warren County were not in any way accessible to the people that we're attempting to hire. So if you don't mind, click to the next chart. If we remove that, looks like a pretty standard bell chart now. If I just look at the homes, it's less than 100 homes that are available in Warren County, obviously a county of tens of thousands of people, less than 100 homes available for less than $500,000. This is across the entire county. I'm not talking about Queensbury and Glens Falls, everywhere. And in fact, the vast majority of our jobs don't allow someone to even access a home at these price points. So I took it down another notch. Would you mind clicking through to the next chart? That's the total number of homes that are under $350,000. And in fact, you and I both know if somebody makes $20 an hour, they can only afford maybe the first 3 bars, if that. We have a big problem here. We have thousands of open jobs, and we will continue to have thousands of open jobs. And we have 40 homes available to them. Now, I don't have the specifics around apartments, but I've done some anecdotal work. I believe in Warren County, there are something like 200 to 300 available apartments in the entire county today. If I put this together, we have 250 places that somebody could even seek to live in, while we have 10 times that number of open jobs. If we do not address this, not only at the affordable level, which is certainly a crux of the problem, but across the entire spectrum of housing supply, if we do not address this problem, we will continue to struggle to grow. And employers will not be able to bring people here to work. If the people were here and ready to work, those job openings would not persist. We are going to have to bring people here. Now, for years, we've gotten at least some of the support through the J1 program, where typically we bring in 1,000 to 1,500 people to work seasonally here. For a variety of factors, we are not going to be able to count on that. In fact, this year we had a fraction of that. This is a structural problem. This is not a market-only problem. This will not fix itself. This comes from more than 10 years of chronic underinvestment in the housing stock. If you go back to that first chart and you're a home builder, it makes perfect sense for you to focus what limited resource you have on the high-end part of the market. That part of the market is price insensitive. When materials go up, they can absorb it. When changes occur, they deal with it. On a fixed price contract down at the bottom of that scale, if materials go up by 30%, it jeopardizes the entire project. Why, as a developer, would you go into that when there's almost unlimited demand to build high-end homes? You don't have a problem. We're going to have to help developers point themselves at the parts of the market that we need. This is not going to be as easy as funding a study. Certainly need to fund the study, but I can tell you I'm already starting to gather the data what the study's going to say. We've got to start to figure out from a political will standpoint, how are we going to address the market so that we accelerate the development of housing across the entire price spectrum? Townhomes, condominiums, elder housing, homes for those that are just working in the hospitality industry seasonally. We have to address all of this simultaneously. I'll give you another piece of information that is somewhat sobering. When we did the work with Roost earlier this year, where we surveyed those that had interest in potentially relocating to the Adirondacks, and I shared some of that data with you earlier, roughly 8,000 people responded to that survey. If we just simply consider those 8,000 people as the entire population, and of course they are not, they're simply the ones that took the time to tell us what they were thinking. But of those 8,000 people, 10% said they were on their way. They were in the process of moving to the Adirondacks. Another 15% said, if my job stays remote and I can continue to do it from my home, I am coming to the Adirondacks. Now, they did not tell us specifically whether they were coming to Tupper Lake, Lake George, or any other specific area. The park has 3 major housing developments in the pipeline. One in Saranac, one in Lake Placid, one in the Tupper Lake area. It took years for those to make their way through the pipeline to, and some of them are not fully approved, but they're all likely to move forward. If all of those get built, and those people who've self-identified as already coming to the Adirondacks come, we are still 1,500 units short in the park. Where will people live if they can't find a home in the park? They will live in places like Queensbury. It's the closest community to the edge of the park. So their demand is our demand, which is why we've engaged regionally with Roost. We can't solve this problem by ourselves. We got to solve this together with them. We've got to figure out how regionally we all step in to this enormous gap we have. It's going to throttle the economic development. And of course, their economics are different than ours. We share a tourism as a fundamental base, but they have virtually no manufacturing or commercial base. So our problems overlap, but they're not the same. But we must work on this together with them. If we try to compete for state and federal dollars against each other, we will not solve this problem. But luckily, we have a process. And it's a process that you helped initiate, which is us working at the front of the table with all our other regional counties to common good. So I'm encouraging all of you to get involved in what will be the next steps. Actually, if you don't mind, can we go back a couple of charts to the words I had about housing? So this past Friday, we had a session, I think it was Friday, it was sometime last week. We had a session over at SUNY Adirondack where we brought national data and a national housing economist together with local data that came from area realtors and the data we've been able to collect as part of this housing group. And we started the dialogue with the community. It's the first of many forums where we've got to raise the level of acumen so that people are informed. Until people are informed, it's going to be difficult for them to be productive in the processes that we've got to develop. It's very natural for people to be resistant to growth, particularly when you come to a place where quality of life and the land itself is part of the reason you came here. You kind of start from a standpoint that says, well, I'm not really sure I want anything else, except we can't do it that way. We won't have anybody in our schools. We won't have anybody serving on our emergency services. Our tax bases will continue to move away from us. The quality of life that we have will continue to move away from us. The skills that we need in the area in order to thrive will not be here. They will age out. We have to figure out how to continue in a balanced way to rejuvenate these areas with both people and appropriate economic development. And in order to do that, we got to get everybody in the community to understand what is the situation. Why is it that that's important? I'd love to engage all of you in that process. I'd love to engage the people who serve on your town boards with you. I would love anyone that's involved in the planning process to be a part of this. I would love those that are on planning boards and zoning boards to be a part of this process. All we're trying to do is bring the information as quickly and as efficiently as we can to as many people as we can so that we can all be informed. Now, there are some ways to do it. We'll lead some of these meetings, but we've also traditionally had a planning conference in the fall. The last 2 years because of COVID, that's gone by the wayside, but we're going to reinitiate it this year. It'll typically be, I think hopefully we'll have it at the fort up at the lake, which has always been the traditional home. But there's a real reason to get together here. We've got to figure out together, we've got a lot of planning documents. Some of them are old, some of them are fairly new, but none of it has the data that has come post the pandemic. And we're in a decidedly different time. We have to decide together how much of that we think is sustainable. Do we think every year our housing market is going to grow by 10 or 15 or 20%? Even if we assume more conservative estimates, our housing market was the 9th hottest housing market in the United States last year, year over year in terms of median price growth. Even if it slows by half, every month that goes by, we not only price more people out, we essentially create the wrong incentives. We only build high-end homes here. We've got to figure out how to build homes for everybody. And I mean that not only in terms of affordable, but also just outside of that range. A $250,000 home is typically not part of the affordable housing portfolio. We don't have any of those either. A townhome for someone who's 70 years old and wants a place where they can live maintenance free is not typically part of an affordable housing portfolio, but we need those. Because if we don't have those, they stay in their single family home and we don't get any movement in the market. We need places for people who work seasonally in our tourism industry. We don't have any place to put them. And the way that we've treated this from a J1 standpoint is not a sustainable solution. There are answers out there. They're hard, cost money, take time, can't do all of it, but we got to go figure out what our choices are. And you're right at the tip of the spear. People need you to do it. We're going to try to help collaborate and facilitate that discussion. Yes, go ahead.
Jim, what's happening in our community is people may do new construction, but they're building them for short term now. You know, that, and we've even had one of, supposed to be rooms available. They're circumventing the process and turning it into short term rentals also, but I see that as a real issue, you know, that people may build, but you're right, but they're turning them into short-term rentals. People in the community move out of their home and do them as short-term rentals. No, we're not getting many apartments, and there are none in our community. We need to address it. But that's part of the problem, because this change of the way things are happening has created some of our problems too. We take these homes.
Supervisor Stroh, hang on.
Earn a lot of money out.
I hear what you're saying, and I think this is all part of a larger data set. There's movement and dynamics in the lodging world. A lot of our hotels and older properties along the lake are also converting. The market is going to reflect the demands that are in the market. We have to try to first understand it and then think about what are the right things for us to do to manage it. But the housing stock, including the traditional lodging stock, is changing. It's changing for sure, and we need to educate ourselves as much as we can about it.
Before we move on with discussion, I just want to point out here and point back to something that Wayne said in his presentation. He's asking for the Board of Supervisors support as the planning department moves away from project management into a more robust planning role. And all of these issues that you're discussing, that you brought up, Supervisor Garrity, they go back to good community planning. And we're going to need every tool in our toolbox for this going forward. So I just wanted to point that out. Supervisor Stroh, you had a question?
Well, I had a thought. You know, a lot of younger people, millennials, and a transitory group prefer not to own their own home. They would rather have apartments. They don't want the burdens of single-family arrangements. They want apartments and they want walkable communities. So when assessing housing, you have to assess the desires of the group of people who would be potentially your workers. And there is somewhat of a movement, I would say growing, away from single-family housing. So I think we need to include that in our analysis.
Absolutely, which is why the next wave of this will be focused on the other housing stocks, including both apartments and other non-single family home type of dwellings, which it's harder to get that data because it's not as robustly tracked. So I've got people literally going out and walking in apartment buildings that from a zoning standpoint look like they're one unit, but actually have 18. You know, I'm also trying to figure out where are those price points so we understand where affordability is. But I can tell you the total number of townhomes and condominiums that were built in Warren County in the last 5 years does not add up to 25. So we are certainly missing a certain part of that continuum. Whether we choose to engage in encouraging that investment is a public policy decision. But I think we need to bring that information to as many people as possible so they can be informed in that conversation. The other thing, and oftentimes people ask me, why is the EDC in this again? And by the way, there's all these organizations, like what does the LDC do? And what does the IDA do in this? And, you know, I got to tell you, we all need to be in this. This is a shared problem that will affect our economy. You as elected leaders need to be in this. We understand that in order for people to come here with a business in hand or with a self-owned single proprietorship, they need a broadband connection and a house. The IDA needs to be in it because if we're going to be able to incent this development, we're going to have to use every tool in the toolbox, certainly legal, but there is precedent for planned unit development and mixed use to be accessible to IDA benefits. The LDC will eventually become a source of potential funding for this. And it has long been, if you look at its history, a source of housing money as well as general economic development money in this county. But we're going to have to figure out everything we have and how we can put all of that together, not competing with each other, but collaborating with each other to address this. This is a generational problem. If we step into it, we position our organization to be relevant in the next 20 to 30 years. If we step away from it, we will be like many that will watch the development go somewhere else. Maybe that's what we want, but I at least want everyone to be informed before they make that decision. Okay, I wanted to tell you quickly about just the economic development climate, so we could click through to, I think, almost the end chart there. This is not much different than the last time I went. There's a couple of things that I want to share with you that are new since the last time that we talked. We have been working diligently with the planning board, as has the planning department at the county, on positioning ourselves for potential very significant, robust streams of federal funding. The current EDA funding in I think more than 6 categories is as robust as I've ever seen in my professional life. We need to figure out how much of that might be applicable to Warren County and to the region. So your county is working diligently, your county staff is working diligently on that. We're working on that. There are regional economic development projects that are potentially game changers that we could potentially fund. I'm in the early stages of discussion with Dan, who you heard from, I think, last month at this committee meeting, Dan Kelleher from the Park Authority, and with the planning board about how we could collaborate on those as opposed to compete. How could we develop a very compelling economic development project that would include the park, would include Warren County, would include much of that catchment area that just applied for this broadband grant together, and access the tens of millions of dollars that is available if we can put a compelling case together. In addition, there's a significant local manufacturing and distribution entity that is looking to expand. We've begun that robust discussions with them about how we would potentially fund that. That has occurred in the last 30 days since I saw you. The work continues to be roughly distributed between the city of Glens Falls, the town of Queensbury, and the rest of the county. This is one of the things that I continue to monitor every single month. Are we seeing a movement that would shift that balance? And so far for a year, it has roughly stayed a third, a third, a third. Last thing I wanted to do is give you a quick update about the LDC. Obviously, you know the EDC has been contracted by the LDC to try to manage the actual operations of the LDC itself. Some of this is similar to some of the information I share with that board. On the right is a chart of during the life of the what is now known as the current Warren County LDC, how many loans have been distributed. It's roughly 25. Of those 25, 10 of them are completely retired. That includes one that was retired this year, fully paid off. 10 are performing. In other words, they are current in terms of their obligations. So 80% of the loan portfolio has either met its obligation or is in the process of meeting its obligation. Now, there are a couple in active settlement discussions. Some of these have been there for more than 10 years. I really am working hard with our attorney from the LDC and the county attorney, who's done remarkable work over time to try to bring these to closure. This is a painful thing, by the way. Closure means writing down money. There are 2 that are delinquent. We got active settlement discussions in place for both. I'm hopeful that one of them will resolve itself in the next 30 to 60 days. That will then move to a different part of the portfolio. But this is also an important thing to understand. We never want to write a bad loan. Nobody ever wants to see anything fail. But in the life of this LDC, 80% of the recipients that we have funded have navigated the process or continue to navigate the process successfully. I believe that you could be proud of that. That is certainly better than the vast majority of the LDCs that I see information from. Does not mean that we don't continue to try to make sure that every one of these is a winner. But if we were going to do this in a fail-safe way, we would be a bank. We are a source of secondary financing, a source of funding to meet gaps, a place to make up where the commercial market does not. We will always accept more risk in that process than a commercial bank would. But you can be proud of the fact that the vast majority of your dollars and the vast majority of the loans that have been made on behalf of the Warren County LDC are things that are performing or have been retired. In addition, I did want to share with you that there's a tremendous amount of work at the LDC to try to update its governance and its operational structures. For a long time, I think it has kind of operated with the same set of bylaws and operating provisions, and there are several things that need to be updated statutorily, and there are several things that were open-ended questions that we need to address as an organization. But that work continues in parallel. And it's also important to note that over the past year, we've had no loan applications. Why is that? Well, because there's better money out there. The federal government put out money at 0 to 1% for a while. I mean, PPP loans were essentially forgivable. They were grants in many cases. The Lake George, Lake Champlain Planning Board continues to put out money at 1.9%, as long as you can demonstrate any COVID-related impact to your business. That's not the space that the LDC has typically operated at, and so there's better money. That money will stop at some point, and the LDC will go back to being one of the backstops for our regional economy. But I think the other thing is we got to go back to helping everybody remember we're still here. We haven't done a lot of active marketing. We spent a lot of time looking at our own structures and our own navels. You know, we got to figure out how to do that and look at the outside world. That's a charge on us as the EDC to go do that. And we're invested in that. In fact, we're meeting with the Banking Review Committee, which is made up of the significant loan officers from the area banks who provide us guidance on not only how the local economy is going, but areas that need to be addressed. And they've identified two. One is supply chain related. There are businesses that are here and that would like to expand, but they can't expand because they have to buy more materials for longer lead times than they ever have. They have to buy 8 months before they need something. They got to hold it all that time. They got to pay for additional warehouse space to hold that inventory. Not part of their pro forma. They would expand, but for that problem. In addition, if they're involved in active construction or even considering it, the cost of materials has gone up dramatically. Now it has started to come back to some degree, but it is nowhere near where it was at the pre-pandemic level. If we would like to accelerate expansion and development activity, we need to potentially look at those that would develop, and there are notable entities in our communities that are stuck in this spot where they have delayed expansions because they're just waiting out the market for wood and steel. We should decide whether or not we think it's in our interest to help them through that. Waiting 2 years has a cost. Now, most of them, by the way, have said, I can't hire the people anyway. But I got to tell you, if we don't solve that housing problem, they're never going to pick that project back up. These problems are all related, and we work on them together with you. I think we've built hopefully a really good texture for that this year that we can continue to build on. That's all I have, unless there's any other questions.
Thank you, Jim. Does anybody have any questions for him? Supervisor Wild.
Madam Chair, thank you. I do have more of a comment. Thank you, Jim, as always. Last year during the budget cycle, I was involved with our funding application for the EDC and LDC. And I think that what we're seeing today from Jim is that the effort that's required to get measurable return out of our investment is significant. It takes a long time to move this needle, whether it's broadband, whether it's housing, whether it's attracting new businesses, understanding where we should go. I'm just trying to compel my peers on this board to consider that when we talk about the budget for the EDC. It's something that I think we need to continue to support heavily. And I'm hopeful that you all will come to that same conclusion. Thank you.
Anybody else have any comments or questions? Is there any public comment, Don?
Hi, no, we have no public comment.
All right, thank you. Thanks again, Jim. And we'll go on to workforce and training. Liza, you still with us?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for your patience.
Sure. I just have 2 resolution requests this morning. The first one is to renew our contract with BOCES for our task class, which is our GED equivalent class. We're hoping to start September 28th. So BOCES facilitates the class and we support it with registering youth and supporting them and with career readiness programs. This is through our federal grant that funds my office, Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. And this year's contract is $914 more than last year, just because of increased fringe costs with BOCES.
Supervisor
Second.
Schau with a second by Supervisor Wild. Is there any discussion or questions? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Thanks, Liza. Next.
Thank you. The second one is to amend our budget to receive our TANF dollars that we use to pay for our summer youth employment program. So currently we use our WIOA youth dollars, and then we reimburse from our TANF dollars, and those checks are coming to the county already.
Motion to bring this to the floor.
I'll make that motion.
Supervisor Frazier,
Second.
second by Supervisor Wild. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Got anything else for us?
That's all I have. I'm happy to answer any questions anybody has, though.
Supervisor Leggett.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Looking through the WIOA youth performance goals, will there be a follow-up report to the board to see how things came out?
Sure. From thank you, Supervisor Leggett. From program year 20, we can help get you some of that information. However, because of the pandemic, they have been very clear with us that there's a lot of performance goals that we're not going to be held accountable to for program year 20 and likely program year 21 as well. But I'm happy to share more information with you, Supervisor Leggett, or anybody.
When you have something.
Supervisors, can I just remind you to speak into the microphone?
Yeah, I wish I could ask you to take your mask off too. It'd be easier to hear. Sorry.
What was that?
Well,
Did you have more questions for Liza while we have her?
no, I don't.
Thank you.
I find it difficult to hear through masks.
We're
Sorry.
focusing on Liza's report right now. Liza, anything else? Anybody else have questions? All right, Don, is there any public comment?
We still have no comment.
Thank you. Motion to adjourn.
Make a motion.
Thank you, Supervisor
Second.
Fraser. Thank you, Supervisor Wild. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.